poussière, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué, poussière, je t'aime, poussière, je t'aime. Tu m'as.
Hello there and welcome to Brussels, my love. Euronews' weekly talk show about the news right here in Brussels and beyond. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thank you for tuning in. Coming up this week, just weeks ahead of European Parliament elections, some startling revelations about what elected officials get up to in their spare time. According to Transparency International, 7 in 10 MEPs earn extra money on the side. And, they say, many raise eyebrows for ethical reasons. We hear what impact that might have on their role as lawmakers and ponder why trust is so low between people and politicians. And happy Pride Week. It's that time of the year again when Brussels is bedecked with rainbow flags to honour the LGBTQ community. Even the EU Foreign Affairs headquarters had embraced the mantra of safe every day, safe everywhere. But with a new report showing that the queer community is experiencing more bullying and violence than ever, we're asking if there really is anything to celebrate. A warm welcome to our guests this weekend. Sophia Ruzak, Senior Researcher from SEPS. Petros Vassoulis, Secretary-General of the European Movement International. And Anna Nalivaiko, Senior Project Officer from the Wilfred Martens Centre. Thank you so much for joining us. But as always, before we bring in your views, we just want to hear more about this new dirt NGOs have dug up about our members of the European Parliament.
7 in 10 MEPs have worked outside this chamber. And a handful are earning big bucks for them. So says recent data from the campaign group Transparency International. And MEPs sitting on the right and centre tend to reap handsome financial benefits compared to those on the left. The news turns heads, but it's not illegal. MEPs can have as many jobs as they want and earn as much as they want, as long as they declare their income and they don't carry out lobbying work. With elections around the corner, we ask if this revelation will taint the image of Brussels and Strasbourg, or if more needs to be done to protect MEPs' reputations.
So, Sophia, how big a deal is this, do you think? How come it's legal for MEPs to have a second job? Should they not park them so that they can focus then 100% on giving attention to their jobs as MEPs?
Yeah, but I mean, it's not so unusual, right? We see this with parliamentarians all over the globe, I would say, that they have side jobs. So I don't think that this is something specifically specific about the European Parliament. But of course, we can discuss whether that's a good thing. I mean, one element here is, of course, time. If you take your parliamentary duty very serious, then this is taking up actually all your time. And if you then have a side job, right, that's carving out time from your parliamentary work.
Well, indeed, it's worth pointing out that many MEPs would have currently worked as lawyers, doctors, farmers, actors, TV presenters. And indeed, as you say, it's not just in the Parliament. I mean, if you look at the UK, there's been a massive controversy over the last couple of years, and the government has promised to crack down on it. But Petros, are you not making fun of the whole idea of an MEP? So how will the public take these institutions seriously if they're not taking their job seriously?
It's important for them to have the opportunity to bring expertise from outside and engage also with the world outside of the chamber. An MEP or any parliamentarian should be in contact with the people that they regulate, the businesses that they have an impact on. So I think it is okay for MEPs to have side activities as long as your report mentioned, is transparent, declared, and above all, above board.
These are big bucks, Anna, that some of them have been reaping for these side jobs. Some of them raise eyebrows, as I said, because they're linked to corporations or private businesses that therefore could be influencing their policies.
Absolutely, but I do very much agree with what Petros said. I think that it's important to also understand that the larger scope of the work in the Parliament, and that is the outreach of being in contact with industries, with business, with civil society, NGOs, etc. And I think it's important also to state that according to current rules, having a side activity or a side earning is legal as long as it's declared, it's transparent, and it is in line with the code of conduct. And I think it's also important to separate that from corruption, because I think the risk here is to sort of allege that all MEPs who have a side activity are automatically corrupt, and that is absolutely not the case.
Well, we of course have a transparency register. Does it work though?
It's not always as robust as we would like it to be. And there have been efforts to strengthen it, in fact, and unfortunately they were watered down. And this is where our attention should be. How do we make sure that the necessary watchdogs have the appropriate amount of power to step in if an MEP or any other civil servant crosses the line and does something that is not according to our values? Because you mentioned trust, we are indebted to trust and we need to maintain it.
There are loopholes. I mean, there are MEPs that are lawyers. And of course, they have to make transparent who they meet as lobbyists in their function as MEPs, but they don't have to do the same when they do this in their function as a lawyer, right?
Indeed, and it's just worth pointing out that in that study by Transparency International, 6 lawmakers, we understand, were earning more than 120,000 per year. That's even more as their salary as MEPs. But to get a little bit more insight into that study, we also wanted to catch up with Transparency International and to some of the people that were working on that research. So we had a chat with Rafael Cargano.
We've been doing this kind of research in MEP side jobs for around 10 years now. And every year we find high income activities, we find activities that are problematic. And one of the key problems, and sort of where it's really disappointing, is that there was an opportunity for proper reform inside the European Parliament. This happened after the Qatargate scandal, where MEPs worked for practically a full year to reform their internal rules. And what we see at the end is a reform that is more cosmetic, where there's some small changes, but overall on these side activities, the system remains the same. When we look at these side activities, one key demand for MEPs is to really adopt a culture of integrity. And that means that we're calling on all candidates to adopt some of our recommendations and to push in the next parliament to make sure we don't have scandals, because, as a reminder, every scandal damages trust, and that we then see the results at the elections.
Rafael Cargano there making the point that, of course, scandals damage trust. And, of course, scandals always make the headlines. And according to Follow the Money, the organisation, and a couple of investigative newspapers, seemingly 163 MEPs out of the current 704 have been implicated in some kind of scandal this term, whether that be harassment, fraud and nepotism. How do you root out those bad eggs, Sophia?
I think the culture so far is more a culture of impunity. That is a problem, right? I mean, we have rules in place, but they were not strict enough in the past. They are stricter now as a consequence of Qatargate, but could certainly be stricter. But also they're not enforced properly, and I think that is the problem.
That's the thing. You say they're stricter, but are they? I ask myself this question all the time. Has the Parliament, Anna, really changed since that huge corruption scandal last December?
I think that Qatargate was this watershed moment in the Parliament, and it shook really the Parliament, and sort of what was happening resurfaced. And I think that steps were taken in the direction. Here I mentioned the 14-point reform plan put forward by Roberta Metsola. Therefore, the Parliament has taken forward steps to sort of tighten the rules and to limit corruption and boost transparency, as well as the adoption of a stricter code of conduct. But I think what is important here also to say that at the end of the day, the Parliament is not an investigative body, and personal responsibility of MEPs is very important.
Indeed, at the end of the day, it'll be all about self-regulation, Petros. Will that work? I mean,
we have to go to the source. How do we select our candidates? Who are the people that we put forward? Because a parliament, any institution can go only this far. It is down to political parties and the way they vet their candidates, the way they select the people they will put forward. So to make sure they're more representative and, above all, more transparent. We need to have more young people, more women, people from all backgrounds, diverse Parliament, not just the few that are there perhaps to enrich themselves or to influence power.
Petros there calling on our viewers there to vote very wisely in these elections coming up on the 6th to the 9th of June. But Sophia, I know you studied this very carefully, the reaction of the Parliament to this corruption scandal last year. Roberta Metsola, the President, was a bit late perhaps coming, many would argue, with her reaction. She also blamed external factors as opposed to looking inside the European Parliament to see where the problems were. Was that the right way to go?
Well, we see that they have improved rules indeed when it comes to reporting requirements, when it comes to financial, laying open your financial situations before and after the office and so on. But to be honest, none of these things will prevent another Qatargate, and here we have, I think, to distinguish between the classical lobbyism, right? This is private interest trying to influence EU law, and foreign interference, right, which is states trying to interfere. So, and the second, so the Qatargate and all the espionage cases that we have seen popping up in the last weeks and months, I don't think anything that the Parliament has done is preventing future scandals of such sort.
And you both meet MEPs on a regular basis in your job. Do you get the feeling they're representing you and the public good, or they're representing corporate interests? Anna?
Well, I mean, I think you can have both, but I think that luckily we live in a democracy. There is an election approaching, so we have a great tool to vote down those who we feel failed our trust and their responsibilities, and to put in place people who we think will represent us best. So I think voting actually that is coming up in June is a great way to speak against those who we think failed their responsibilities.
And it is also the role of all of us, citizens, but also civil society, to really scrutinize those that are elected and ensure that they do represent the citizens that put them there, rather than interests that might be not so benevolent.
Well, as it is just a few weeks to those European Parliament elections, we took to the streets of downtown Brussels to ask locals if they trusted politicians. Take a listen out to their answers.
Absolutely not.
In a way, how you say, I think they can do better with transparency.
I think I trust them, but I don't know everything about what they do behind the scenes. So it's like in between.
I do, but not all of them. I'm not really a big fan of like the extremists parties.
I don't believe that they actually are there for the people. I don't trust the state.
I stopped to trust anything. I don't trust anything.
So there you go. That is the reality. If you go outside any of the political bubbles of any of the European capitals, they're the kind of responses you'll be hearing.
Yes, but then again, if you look at Eurobarometer data, interestingly enough, after Qatargate, there was a bit of a dip in trust in the EU institutions, but it has then recovered again and remained stable since then. And I don't think that it's because people don't think this was a bad thing, but I think there's too little interest and too little scrutiny, which is a bigger problem of the European Parliament. That the scandals, they leave people's mind quickly because they don't care so much.
If you dig a little bit deeper, you see that the trust actually in EU institutions is higher than in national institutions. Yeah. And of course, there is not a competition, you know. We need to have trust in politics across the board at every level. But again, as Sofia mentioned, I think the EU is still seen as a bastion of transparency and values.
There's not a competition, but sometimes there feels like there is a competition, between national governments and the EU institutions.
Well, for sure, but I think that indeed trust in EU institutions is higher than that in national parliaments or national governments, but also to what extent what we heard is influenced by disinformation, because we know that there are a lot of disinformation and misinformation campaigns out there against the EU or trying to damage the EU's image. So I think that we also have to look at that aspect, to what extent disinformation influences the trust of citizens towards the representatives in the EU.
And the situation, of course, different across Europe. We were taking a look at studies in Norway, Iceland, Sweden. Trust is very high in politicians, and whereas in countries like Slovakia, it's still very low. So there's still a lot that needs to be done, perhaps culturally, in many countries, Sophia, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's great differences among the EU countries, and especially in those countries in which the democratic culture still has to be manifested and strengthened. Of course, those trusted processes often less, and also the elections and the electoral process. Right, we also see this in turnout. Right, which is in some countries. I think in Slovenia the election turnout was 16% for the last EP elections, if I'm not mistaken, but very, very low in any case.
Well, Petros, what would you say to people who feel disappointed? And we get a lot of viewers writing to us here at Euronews saying they're genuinely disappointed. They really don't feel and reap the benefits, even though I know you're talking about the Eurobarometer, trust has gone up, etc., etc. But this is the reality, what people really are feeling.
And we have seen this in our polling. People feel disempowered. They think that their voice doesn't matter. And I think it's important to support a little bit representative democracy and add a participatory element to it too. Give citizens the opportunity to be part of the democratic process, not just once every 5 years by casting their ballot, but every day, every month of the year, to make sure that their voice at the local, at the regional, at the national, at the European level is echoed not just once every 5 years, but regularly.
Indeed, because now when people see politicians, they're mostly being chaperoned around cities, in motorcades, they have... it looks like they have a great life, access to everything, lots of privileges, lots of services at their toenails, and of course very little access to real people. That's the problem. They feel very far away.
Absolutely. Sometimes politicians are detached from reality, and we are sitting here in Brussels, and we are part of the Brussels bubble, and sometimes that feels detached from reality. So I think indeed bringing citizens closer and making them part of democracy is very important, as well as just for politicians to embrace society and embrace citizens and be very forward and transparent in what they represent and what is happening. So I think also communicating better what is happening in Brussels, what is happening in politics is very important as well.
Very important. And did you all follow the so-called Russiagate scandal earlier this year, which alleged that certain MEPs were under the influence of sources close to the Kremlin, allegedly receiving money? According to the Belgian Prime Minister here, Alexander De Croo, spies proved that there was actually transfers made. This is also very problematic, Sophia.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this across all parties, and we see this on the EU level, and we see this on the national level. And again, the problem is that, you basically would need a European intelligence service on the EU level to prevent these things. So the national level, they have their intelligence services to deal with these things. But the EU, we are dependent on the Belgian authorities, right? So I think there's more than new transparency rule inside the parliament to prevent future corruption scandals of such scale.
Indeed, very, very challenging times. And also, Petros, you've been in Brussels for a long time. There's also the problem of revolving doors. We have a major issue as well with that. People who leave politics and within a week they could be sitting on a board of a corporation. Or I remember Nelly Cruz a couple of years ago, the former commissioner in charge of digital.
Yeah, it's very important.
On the board of Uber.
Again, we must not forget that there are relationships, of course, that develop, and people have a career beyond politics, and they should have a career beyond politics. They shouldn't stay in politics for all their lives. But yes, rules are very important. Distance needs to be created, and above all, we always go back to this. The silver bullet is having a structure and a method to select the people that actually represent us, to ensure that the right individuals, whether they are from whichever party, are there to serve the citizens that elect them rather than anybody else. So we need a robust system that starts from the root. How do we select candidates, and how do we help them get into positions of power? Diverse, multiple sources, and above all, transparent.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about political will. We need political will, and you need to see real, proper political muscle in that incoming set of MEPs coming in this term. Do you think that could be possible? What kind of new European Parliament do you foresee?
Well, there's hope that it's going to be possible. And I think that the question of personal responsibility, once again, is very important because MEPs have to act ethical. Of course, there is a bit of a fear of the parliament shifting to the right. And once again, you mentioned Russia. Russia's outreach is very big. And it looks like those on the extreme right are more likely to have links to Russia. So I think we have to be very careful about the influence that these MEPs could potentially have from foreign agents that are trying to undermine the EU from within.
What's your take on that? Do you think that the Parliament will be able with this?
Well, we will see again a high turnover of MEPs. We will again probably see 60% new MEPs. But what, I think we do see a chance here to maybe take those fresh transparency rules, which are only in place, some of them, by the way, can only be really in effect with a new next parliament. And maybe that is a chance for transparency then, that to have 60% of fresh.
And will those rules really have teeth? Talk us through those rules.
Well, so for instance, when it comes to meetings with lobbyists, I think this is a big point, right? That MEPs now have to always declare when they meet with lobbyists, even if those do not regard the reports that they are working on in that very moment, as it was before. Also, for instance, their assistants, they also have to, if they meet lobbyists, they have to declare and make transparent those meetings. And we know how important these assistants are for their work. And again, as I said, they also have to declare how much money they have in the beginning and in the end of the mandate, although not in between. So, I mean, many of these rules could have had much more teeth, to be honest, if there was not so much resistance from the center-right and the right spectrum of the European Parliament. If you look at the left, the Greens and the left, I mean, they ask for much stricter rules. They, for instance, also want to abolish the opportunity of having side jobs altogether. But there is a very strong conservative majority still of different kinds of parties that are intertwined too heavily with the lobby. And so they prevent deeper change from happening.
And that's a major concern as well of Emily O'Reilly. She is the EU Ombudsman, and she's worried that in the future we're going to see a lot of EU climate laws delayed or diluted even because of many MEPs being linked to lobbyists. But with that conclusion, we can conclude that conversation. Thank you so much to our panel. And you stay with us because after the break, we'll be hearing how more and more people here in Europe are coming out, but how also attacks and hate against this community are spiking. See you soon. welcome back to Brussels, my love, with me, Maeve McMahon. Now, this week, Brussels celebrated annual Pride Week. The display of colour and diversity aspires to raise awareness about the challenges for the LGBTIQ plus community. According to extensive new research from the Fundamental Rights Agency in Vienna, the good news is more people are coming out of the closet in Europe, but the bad news is violent attacks are going up. Over 1 in 2 are open about who they are, but 1 in 3 face discrimination every day, and half of young LGBTIQ have suicidal thoughts, and most were also bullied in school. So this is quite worrying data, because this was a very extensive report, as I said, that was carried out by the Fundamental Rights Agency. Is Europe getting more homophobic, Sophia?
Well, it is alarming, right? And I think while there is still this East and West divide, right? I mean, the situation in Eastern European countries such as Hungary and Poland, but also Bulgaria, as this has also shown, is with the worst across the EU. But, you know, also in Western European countries, this kind of violence is increasing. And I think what is interesting in this study is, and equally alarming, is this differentiation between gays and lesbians on one side, which seem to be increasingly accepted. But then when it comes to trans, intersexual people, and, you know, more widely speaking, people, gender that are less gender or non-gender conformative, they are facing great aggression across the European Union.
And a lot of hate online as well and off. Petros, what more could the EU and, of course, EU governments be doing here?
Yeah, there are 2 elements. Of course, legislation can go only this far. Education is very important. The cultural change that we need to implement across the European Union is what will make the difference. How we bring up our children, the kind of values we teach them, the tolerance, acceptance, openness. Because the more diverse a society is, the richer it is. And it is very encouraging that we have seen people coming out and really being proud of who they are. But this is also why elections are very important. You know, we want all communities, minorities especially, to come forward, stand for office, so they can make our politics more diverse too. But the far right, the extremes, are attacking them online and in person exactly because they want to keep them away. They want to minimize their voice and their role in society. And that's where we have to come up with legislation to protect them, enable them to take office, shape their society and our politics, but also stand by them as individuals and tell them that we are with you. You know, your voice matters, your difference is a strength, we will support you.
Well, we wanted to hear as well from ILGA Europe. They're, of course, the voice of the community here in Brussels, and hear more really on the realities that they're facing in 2024. So we caught up with their director, Shaber. Take a listen.
The situation for LGBTI people in Europe is a very mixed bag. Too few countries protect against hate crimes and hate speech. Too few recognize rainbow families. Barely any countries have any protections for intersex people or asylum seekers, and many of those are within the competence of the EU. So within this coming election, we really need candidates to step up to the challenge and to commit. Freedom of movement, which is at the core of EU values, is not secured for trans people, for intersex people, for non-binary people, for rainbow families. So the new Commission and the new Parliament really needs to prioritize filling those legislative gaps, and that really needs to happen soon.
So the director of ILGA there, Shaber, speaking to us. Anna, reaction to what you heard there, pretty troubling.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that looking at the EU as a whole, it's a place where there has been the biggest leap in legislative and societal changes when it comes to LGBTQI rights. But is it uniform across the EU? No, absolutely, it's not. It varies very much from member states. I think what is important is that both the European Parliament and the Commission stand behind LGBTQI communities. And here I'm referring to the fact that when Hungary and Poland put forward the quote-unquote LGBTQI ideology-free zones, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke very harshly against it, and an infringement process was started against these countries.
Well, we have seen the Foreign Affairs Department, the EEAS here in the EU Quarter, they have put the rainbow poster up this week, so they're taking a stance. But what they really need to do as well is use the leverage that they have when they're negotiating, especially with aspiring EU countries, Petros, many of those countries really not fulfilling their commitments and stalling back in the introduction of legislation in this field, according to that ILGA report.
Indeed, the EU is a bastion of fundamental values, and we need to project them both inside but outside. But if I may, I'll take a step back and still focus what's going on in the EU. You know, we've seen in Italy, for example, where a far-right political party has taken power, might be playing ball in Brussels, engaging in constructive politics as we understand it in the EU bubble, but at the national level, they're undermining fundamental rights of minorities, including those rainbow families who are seeing their rights being taken away. So it is very important to be able to put pressure on national governments. The EU must have the instruments to put pressure to ensure that they don't violate our values.
But no one's speaking up to them about that. You can be sure that Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, when she meets Giorgia Meloni, that is not a topic on the table, Sophia.
No, indeed. But I'd like to pick up the point that Petros made. The important is so important. And to bring together the LGBTIQ community and general society more at large, and to kind of dismantle this enemy picture that some politicians drew, and especially right-wing politicians indeed drew.
And what about the situation in Ukraine, an aspiring EU country, of course?
Yeah, well, I think that EU there leads by example, and specifically on the example of Ukraine. Ukraine has held its first gay pride in 2013. Before that, there was no gay pride in Ukraine, and in 2013, so we are talking slightly before Maidan. There have been a lot of protests and resistance from society for the gay pride, but it has been held. And then if you fast forward to 2019 saw the biggest gay pride in Ukraine and the most peaceful one. So I think that kind of shows that EU does lead, for example, and that countries who aspire to become EU members follow that lead. And I think we see a lot of improvement there.
Okay, well, that is a very interesting discussion that we will have to keep an eye on, of course, as we follow EU enlargement, which has been slightly put on pause now as those elections take place. But with that, we can conclude this conversation. Thank you so much, Sophia Ruzak, for being with us, and also Petros and Anna for being our guests. And thank you for watching, as always, here on Euronews. For any more information on any of our stories and for more insight, in fact, into that rainbow map by ILGA Europe, you can check out our website, euronews.com. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Take care. See you soon. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon, and along with our panel, we're just sifting through the news of the week. And one that we could not let pass was this, the 68th edition of the Eurovision Song Contest that took place last weekend in Malmö, Sweden. Around 160 million viewers tuned in from all over the globe to witness Switzerland win with the song The Code by the artist Nemo, the first non-binary winner of the competition.
I want to say thank you so much. I hope this contest can live up to its promise and continue to stand for peace and dignity for every person in this world.
So, who tuned in to the Eurovision Song Contest? Anna?
Well, actually, I think I'm one of the very few people not watching Eurovision, but I'm very well informed on all the win, and especially of this one. And
Sophia, did you watch it?
I watched parts of it, but also not the whole show. No.
What about you, Pedro?
I watched the whole thing. It was actually the first time I watched it together with my daughter, who is 9 years old and is finally getting into this. And it's great fun. It also has been a tradition for me and my friends. It represents unity, diversity. It's a great occasion to celebrate the things that really make us European.
So do you agree with that, or do you think it's a little bit outdated?
No, I don't think it's outdated. I mean, it's a 68-year-old tradition, right? I think it's quite amazing. It's a bit like a cultural stage of the EU or something like this. I mean, when do you ever have so many people watching the same thing on TV, right? What was it, 160, 170 million or something? I mean, that is quite remarkable.
And I think it's also a source of pride for the countries that are participating. I think countries are very proud to have their representative and their, performers singing on stage.
Yeah, and you can see that the energy in the crowds is unbelievable. And of course, united in music, that was the motto for the contest. And politics, of course, it was always meant to be left at the door. But the contest always gets political. But lots of people in Brussels this weekend got very upset because, of course, the EU flag was not allowed in. And we saw Margarita Skinas, the Vice President of the Commission, taking to Twitter to express his frustration that, the EU flag is a symbol of this diversity and talent. And a month before the European elections, the EU flag perhaps should have been let in. Sophia, what would be your take on that?
So I must agree, I think, with this. I think they went maybe a little step too far in attempting to be not political. Because in the end of the day, I understand that they want to make a case of we are only entertainment and we are not politics, right? Because once you open this Pandora's box, it's difficult to stop. But it has always been political.
Of course. And this year, the music attracted less attention than the protests against Israel's participation, for example, Petros.
Indeed. It's impossible to separate society from everything that's happening around. Entertainment is actually part of who we are. And whether we like it or not, it is important for artists to also voice their ideas and contribute their thoughts about the issues that matter to people. We want that. We want that engagement. Again, the Commission recently called to Taylor Swift to come forward and encourage people to vote. And then we cannot just say, no, you're artists, all you have to do is go on stage, sing, entertain us, and please keep your opinions to yourself. There is a contradiction there. On the contrary, we need to make sure that art, culture are part of our society and they engage with the issues that really affect our lives.
And last year's contest, I think, was dominated by flags, the Ukrainian flags, in fact, in the crowds.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, it is for Ukraine. Ukraine has taken home quite a few wins at Eurovision. It's a great source of pride for the nation to be part of this contest. But going back to the politics, I think it has always been political. I think it's impossible to take politics out of events of such magnitude. And also sport is political. So whenever we have so many countries participating in one event, unfortunately, as much as we want to leave the politics out of it, I don't think it's possible.
And just briefly on Margarita Skinas' sulk this week about the EU flag. Do you think he's gotten over it by now?
I don't think he should. He really should pursue the point with the EBU and ensure that, because at the end of the day, what the European flag represents is something that a lot of Europeans relate with. And asking them to keep that flag out, it goes against what they feel is them.
I'm going to wrap up this discussion. Sophia Ruzak, thank you as well for being with us. Petros and Anna Nalivaiko as well. And thank you so much for watching, as always. If you've any comments on anything you've heard today or any points as well you'd like to make on these upcoming European Parliament elections, please reach out. We love hearing from you. Our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com. You can also reach out to us on social media, send us a direct message, and I promise we will get back to you. Take care and see you soon.